All right, let's get started. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Would it surprise any of you to learn that President Biden has canceled more student loans in his first year and a half in office than any other American president has in history in their entire administration? If so, you probably wouldn't be the only one. Like on so many issues, the press and often advocates themselves focus relentlessly on what more they want the administration to do. But that sometimes has the consequence of shortchanging the life-altering work that's already been accomplished under this administration. So today we really want to help paint out that fuller picture of where we are today and what's been accomplished under President Biden and his administration so far. I'm Lanae Erickson. I'm a Senior Vice President at Third Way, and I am excited to be joined for the first part of this conversation by Ashley Harrington, who is a Senior Advisor to the Chief Operating Officer at the Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid. Prior to going into FSA, Ashley led a long life as an advocate for borrowers, particularly borrowers of color. She worked at Center for Responsible Lending, at UNCF, and at the New York Governor's Office, and really has been an expert and a leader on issues of racial wealth disparities and how consumer protections can address them and create a more equitable society moving forward. So it is great to have you here today, Ashley, with us, and thank you for spending the time.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, really excited to be here and to have this conversation.
Great. So let's start with the top line. You know, we've had just over a year in office with President Biden. He's canceled more student loan debt than any other president in history, as I mentioned. Why do you think that that is a fact that might surprise some folks? Why is it something that's not on the tip of everyone's tongue?
You know, that's a really good question. I think, there's a lot going on right now. There are a lot of things that we are dealing with as a nation, as a world, that we're dealing with as communities, as individuals. So there's a lot of that. And there are a lot of people talking about student loans in general, right? There are a lot of voices weighing into this conversation. And that makes a lot of sense because it affects over 40 million Americans directly, and even more than that indirectly, because these people have families, these people are a part of communities. So it's so much bigger than just the 44 million. But so I think, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of voices. What we are doing is not always splashy, right? It's not always the exciting thing to talk about, but it really is transformative. It is really helping hundreds of thousands of borrowers, and it's going to continue to help even more as this administration progresses. And we're really, really excited about that. We're excited about the tangible, real impacts we are having for borrowers. We are changing lives, and it's very, very exciting.
So can you just take us through the numbers to date? How much has the administration canceled in student loans? What kind of borrowers has that impacted? And what are kind of the real life impacts that you're seeing there?
Yeah. So we have canceled over $17 billion for over 700,000 borrowers. I'm always having to check my numbers, make sure that I have the most up-to-date ones, because it's changing every week, which is also exciting. And so that includes over $6 billion in relief for over 100,000 public servants, right? Who have been working for a decade or more for some of them, and giving back to this country, to our society, and now have gotten the benefit of getting PSLF and the promise that Congress promised them back in 2007. It's over $3 billion in relief in closed school discharges and borrower defense discharges. Almost $8 billion in relief for 400,000 borrowers through the TPD, through total and permanent disability. So we are really helping borrowers who need it the most, and we are really targeting that relief and looking at how we make this system work better for more borrowers and how we make it easier to navigate for these borrowers.
So I have never worked in the Department of Education, and I don't expect to moving forward. It seems very complex to me and lots of other people. I'm curious though, if you can just raise the curtain for us a little bit, behind the scenes, what does it take to cancel a person's debt? how many department staff need to be involved in, getting one person to that point? How much time does it take to, to get to that life altering place for people?
I mean, it takes a lot. I don't think I can even like adequately quantify it, but having joined the department, I am just constantly so impressed by all of the work that is being done here and all of the care and concern for borrowers across the department. I think it takes an entire team, like, the village that takes to raise a child is the team that it takes to get student borrowers. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. Implementing this PSLF waiver, for instance, right? We knew when we announced it that it would take time, and it is taking time, right? It's making systems talk to each other. Some of them are really old systems. It's doing all of this at a time when we are also, transferring servicers. Some servicers are exiting the system. We have a payment pause going on. We have all of these things that are happening. We're trying to transfer our student loan data system over. So all these things are happening, and so many things interconnect with each other. And so many systems and people and teams are involved in making sure all of this works, right? From making sure borrowers get the information, to making sure servicers have the information, to making sure everything is correct on our website and that we're constantly updating it, to making sure we have the correct data and numbers about what is going on in the relief. It takes a lot of people and a lot of work, but what is most important is how committed everyone here is to making all of this happen and to providing relief to as many borrowers as possible.
And I know you all made some news today, just a couple of hours ago, around borrowers who were in default when we put this payment pause into place through COVID relief. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, the decision-making process to do that, and what that will mean for folks who have been struggling to pay back their loans even before the pandemic?
So I think this is just another example of the emphasis that the Biden administration is placing on helping borrowers and making sure that everyone has what it takes so they don't come out of this crisis worse off. And so, so many borrowers enter the pandemic in delinquency, and because of the payment pause, they're no longer going to have that. And so we also wanted to make sure we're extending that to borrowers who are in default. And so we're providing that fresh start so that everyone can come out of this at the end of this payment pause, ready to get back on track and stay on track. And so more details about that are going to come out in the coming weeks. Please stay up on studentaid.gov, where we will constantly have updates. And then also you can refer to some of the press statements that came out today. But I think it's really exciting. We know that there were millions of borrowers who were in default and struggling before this pandemic. And of course, so many are continuing to struggle and maybe struggling more because of the pandemic. And so this is going to be a big relief for a lot of them as well.
And we know that being in default has so many consequences for people across their life. So that is a really fantastic fresh start for folks to be able to, be on solid footing moving forward.
Yeah.
How can you talk a little bit about the PSLF waiver, what folks might need to know? I suspect that there might be some folks on this phone call who do jobs that qualify for PSLF, who have student loans themselves, and I know there's a real time sensitivity with some of the work that you all are doing here. So we'd love for you to just make sure that at least everybody who's listening to this and watches it later knows that if they're eligible, they can get their ducks in order.
Thank you, because I love talking about the PSLF waiver, and we want to make sure every single borrower who can benefit knows that there are steps they have to take before October 31st, 2022. October 31st, 2022. I like to say it twice because we want to make sure people hear that date and know that it's real. So we have made the public service loan forgiveness work for more borrowers. We know that there have been a lot of issues over the year in how it was communicated and how it was talked about and what people thought they had to do to qualify, from what type of loans they had to have, to what type of repayment plan, to what counted as a qualifying payment. And so recognizing that we had a system that was far from perfect. We had a communication system that was far from perfect, but that there was this promise. There's this promise embedded in PSLF. And if we're going to make that promise a reality, then we had to take steps to do that. And so we unveiled this limited waiver, and it does a couple of things that are really, really important. For borrowers who still have federal family education loans or Perkins loans, which are loans that are not originated by the federal government, but guaranteed by the federal government, it enables them to get PSLF forgiveness. Previously, in order to get it, you had to consolidate to the direct loan program, and then you would lose all the credit. You could have been working as a teacher for years. You could have been working as a nurse for years, a firefighter for years, but you would lose all that credit once you consolidated. That is no longer the case under the waiver. Under the waiver, if you've previously consolidated a loan, you're going to get credit for that underlying loan as long as you also have qualifying employment. If you still have these loans, you can consolidate now before October 31st, 2022, and get credit towards PSLF for that loan pre-consolidation. We're also making it so as long as you were in repayment, even if it was a couple dollars short or a couple days later, anything like that, as long as you were in active repayment status, you are going to be able to get credit towards PSLF for that loan. And so these are really, really transformative things. That's in addition to all that we are doing to automate the process, right? We're working with OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, and DOD to make it easier for federal employees and veterans and service members to get access to PSLF. We're talking to states about how we can do that with them as well. So we're constantly thinking about ways that not only do we make the program itself better, but we make the process better for borrowers. And so it's really exciting when over 100,000 people now have gotten PSLF relief who didn't have it before.
Wow, and thank you for that. I know lots of folks who have benefited from it myself, and as somebody who went to law school and then figured out way later that I was in the wrong repayment plan to qualify for PSLF. I really appreciate the work you all have done, and just remember sitting during the DeVos, during the Trump administration with Betsy DeVos, and maybe a literal handful of borrowers actually were able to get that promise that we've made to them, and so now you guys have really made huge strides on that, and I thank you on behalf of everyone on this call.
No problem. We're really, really excited because it's not just the borrowers who've gotten relief, right? It's all the borrowers who are going to see their payment counts jump, and they're going to get that much closer to relief. I went to law school too. I'm a PSLF candidate. And I was saying on a webinar the other day, just watching my payment count change is that is encouraging, right? I may not be at relief yet, but knowing that I am making progress and I can see light at the end of the tunnel, that is so helpful. And I know it's helpful to so many borrowers who didn't feel like that there was a light in the tunnel before. Yeah, it's really, really important. So I know that as folks who work in government, you hear from people that are upset, right? That's when most of us call our government officials, is when we're frustrated or upset about something. But is there also a feedback loop to hear from people that are relieved or benefiting from the policy changes you all put into place? As you said, there's so many people that are dedicated to this, that are working endless hours. I know I get emails at 3 a.m. from folks who work with you, and I'm just curious, do you ever get to hear back from the beneficiaries of these efforts, and if so, what are you hearing? Yeah, so I think we get it a couple of ways. One, we get the ones that people do email us directly, either through someone in the department that they know or through our ombudsman's office, or even, there have been people at FSA who have benefited from this, right? Or who have family members or friends that benefit and they share it. We also get it from organizations like yours who share with us these great stories. And we've started also tracking it on social media and just sharing it across FSA so people know how impactful their work is and can see the joy. And so I think what we see is just joy, relief, excitement, people thinking about finally what they can do next with their life now that they don't have this huge burden, people being just grateful and thankful that they have been seeing that we listen to them. We did this huge RFI for PSLF last year, and we had tens of thousands of comments. And I think people are seeing that we were listening and we're putting these things into place, and they are excited about it. I think there's still more to do on this and a lot of programs, but what I think we see the most is just joy, real pure joy. People posting videos of them crying, right? Being surprised, where did this come from? And so we love it. We love to see it. It's nice when you can use social media for joy rather than pain, which is what I feel like we mostly all get from it. But
So I see that some folks are starting to ask questions in the chat. Please feel free to send me some questions. We have Ashley for a few more minutes before we turn things over to one of those folks who has in fact benefited from all this great work. So Ashley, I know we're talking about forgiveness for folks that that qualify, and that's an important piece of dealing with student debt and what is already out there. But what are some of the other fixes you all are thinking about to address college affordability, to address repayment, even for the borrowers that may not qualify for forgiveness at this point or for future borrowers?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've nailed it. So the vision of the secretary is really a system that is more affordable and more inclusive, and that is across the board for people coming in, for people currently in school, and for people when they come out and have loans that they have to deal with. So we are looking at we have, a number of rulemaking process going on, looking at how our repayment plans are set up and our income-based repayment plans, and how we make those more affordable and easy to navigate. More rules on PSLF. We're looking at ways that we can increase accountability for institutions through strong gainful employment and borrower defense rules. We've also been working on the FSA side to increase accountability for our servicers. We introduced contracts with strong consumer protection and borrower-centered language in a way that we have never done before. And so we are centering the experience of borrowers across the board, and we're making sure our stakeholders know that is the case, and that is our goal, is that we want the borrower experience to be as good as it can be. And so, and also in terms of accountability, we relaunched our Office of Enforcement. And so we're going to be looking at those institutions that pose huge risk to borrowers and students and to taxpayers. And so we are really focusing on how we make sure our system works better, how we make sure everyone in the system is held accountable, and how we better serve all borrowers. And we also, we know that there are disparities in outcomes and things like that. And we also know that there are things that borrowers are facing. And so we're trying to think about that and incorporate that and make sure we are providing fixes that help as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm. And I know you all have really talked about kind of targeting loan relief first and foremost towards the people that need it the most, the folks that have been defrauded, folks who are permanently disabled, folks that are really in dire straits. Can you talk a little bit about what that kind of prioritization looks like within the department, how you all think about like where do we really need to start? There's obviously a lot to do, but so how do you decide where to start?
I think it's just kind of like we just start, right? And so we look at the places, one, where we know we can take executive action and we know we can take steps, right? We know that we can do something about this. We look at places where we can do things internally to make our process easier, whether we can automate systems, whether we can make systems talk to each other, whether we can work better with other federal agencies. We look at the programs that are already there and that people have been struggling with for a while, because most of the time that's not a secret. It's not a secret what borrowers have been struggling with. It's not a secret some of the frustrations that borrowers and stakeholders have. And so we look at all of those and we say, we know there is so much to do, such a short time. But like you said, prioritizing borrowers who need it the most, who are in some of those most precarious financial positions, and thinking about the moment that we are in right now and how we make sure when we come out of this, no student loan borrower is worse off, and that every student loan borrower is prepared to move forward.
So I do have a question from folks that are watching, wondering if you have seen impacts that the payment pause and the forgiveness that you all have been able to put into place impact communities or impact families. Are there some tangible impacts? As you said, this is not just about the individual, but their broader network.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing people talk about what they're going to do now that they have this relief, what it means that for the payment pause borrowers who are struggling and who are continue to struggle prior to the pandemic. And now, even as our economy recovers, there's still more to be done. And that's what we're monitoring. We're seeing borrowers say, oh, I was able to navigate this, right? You see it both in the individual sense and in the stories that we see and hear. But I mean, I think you can also see it in some of the aggregate sense and what we see folks reporting in surveys and in other places like that. You're seeing that they're able to continue to pursue opportunities to support their families, to think differently about what their lives look like, right? And so I think, yeah, it's been amazing. I think this is relief that is sorely needed, and there's absolutely more to be done, but we are definitely seeing how important the work we are doing is and how many people it's impacting.
So obviously, student loan servicers are something that folks love to hate, but they're required in the way that we set things up in order to work with borrowers. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you all have done with servicers? You mentioned additional accountability. You mentioned needing to have lots of communications with them right now during the payment pause period. How are those conversations coming, and what do you think about when you're trying to prioritize, re-upping contracts or moving portfolios so that borrowers can get the best servicers that we can possibly get for them?
I mean, we think about just that. We think about the borrowers, and we're creating a borrower-centered system. And so that was what we did when we negotiated these new contracts, and we made sure that servicers knew that is our goal. That's what's in this process. If you want to be a federal student loan servicer, you're going to have to be borrower centered, and that's going to be reflected in the contract terms and conditions. And also, so we made those really strong contract terms, but these are short-term contracts. We're preparing for a long-term servicing solution, and all of that is also critical and essential to what we're doing and creating a borrower-centered system that makes sure that there are consumer protections, that there is accessibility, that borrowers know their options and that they can see their options for themselves where they need to, right? So we're making sure that borrowers have more information, regular conversation with the servicers, constantly updating them, our call centers, everything, to make sure they know everything that's going on, from the payment pause to how the PSLF waiver is, to providing talking points, also, talking to them about how we manage and prepare, because we're not just thinking about this week, we're thinking about next week, we're thinking about a month from now. We're constantly planning, as you have to with a portfolio this big. And so I think can always keeping borrowers at the forefront and saying that is our focus, that is our goal, and we want to keep working with you on this, but this is what we're doing.
Yeah. So there are some aspects of this conversation that are quite partisan, but there's also some, bipartisan agreement that we need to make some fixes to our student loan system. Are there any conversations you all are having with the Hill or publicly that you think are kind of productive places we might be able to make progress, just to even make the existing system work better, if not for kind of a major overhaul, which might be a little out of Congress's wheelhouse at the moment?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of places, like you said, there is definite recognition that there's a lot to be done. I think people recognize that we have to fix some of our repayment programs. I think people recognize that we have to do something about bankruptcy and how student loan debt affects that. I think there's just a general recognition that we have to be in conversation and be working with all stakeholders across the board to make sure that the system works. And I think there's just, I think those are the main things, and just recognizing that there are things that have to change in the system, and we are approaching a time where we need to have this long-term servicing solution, for instance. And so coming together to figure out what all that looks like and how we make sure that it's a system that works for borrowers and for taxpayers.
Yeah. So I have another question from the audience here. At the end of President Biden's first term, what would you like the news headline to read on the administration's response to loan forgiveness?
Wow. I mean, I think what we want the headline to read is that in general, that we've provided more support for student loan borrowers than ever before, that we have created a system that works for more borrowers, that borrowers can access relief that borrowers can better manage their loans and that their loans don't manage them. I think we just want a system that is more affordable, more inclusive, and that really represents the vision and values of a higher education system for all.
So FSA might not be kind of the sexiest place in an administration to decide to go. I have somebody who is wondering, kind of what drove you to go work on this super complex, potentially under the radar issue, and in this position where you knew that there's a lot to untangle here, and none of it's easy, and it's kind of yeoman's work.
Yeah, so FSA's job is to implement and manage this portfolio. And as someone who came from the advocacy world and was particularly interested in how student debt affects communities of color and Black borrowers in particular, so much of what we do is not just about what the policy says in the statute or in the reg or in the guidance. It's about how it's implemented and what we do. And so I wanted to be at FSA because these are the folks that are making sure we implement things the correct way, that are thinking about how this will impact borrowers. These are the folks that get to talk directly to borrowers in so many ways. And so I think it's so important that we are not just thinking about what we say, but what we do. And that's where FSA falls in.
Well, I've got one more question before we turn it over to the second half of our conversation. But curious, you have a lot of folks who work in this space on the line. What can we all do to help in the efforts that you all are making to to reach borrowers and make sure that everybody knows about the Halloween deadline? I'm going to start calling it the Halloween deadline now because you keep saying October 31st. But what do you need from us as advocates for borrowers and for students to make sure that the work you're doing is as impactful as possible in communities?
Yeah, we just help us get the word out, right? There are going to be times where we do our very best to reach all the borrowers, and some we have better access to than others. So help us. You reach borrowers as well. You reach other stakeholders. Talk not just directly to the borrowers. Talk to employers, state leaders, other places where we can continue to get this word out and tell borrowers this is available. Here's what you have to do. Just make sure that we are reaching the people we want to reach, and be that that reinforcing mechanism, because sometimes they may not open an email from Department of Education as much as we would like them to, but they might open an email from someone they trust who comes from another organization like Third Way or somewhere else. And we recognize that. And so we see this as we need everybody's help to get this word out. So please, please, please help us do that. Send people back to studentaid.gov, where we're keeping so much up-to-date information, and we want to make sure everyone is informed. But that is how you can really help us, is just keeping up the drumbeat.
Studentaid.org, there it is. I was just going to ask you what the website is.
Studentaid.gov.
Studentaid.gov. Yes, there we go. See, I was going to send somebody to some Russian bot website. Yes, studentaid.gov. Thank you so much, Ashley, for having this conversation with us and taking the time on what I know is a busy day. And we are going to let you go, and I am going to turn things over to my colleague, Michelle Dimino, who is going to talk a little bit more about the impacts of this work. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lanae and Ashley. I'm Michelle Dimino. I'm a senior policy advisor here at Third Way, and I'm happy to be joined now for a brief conversation with Brian Walsh. Brian is a professor in the Los Angeles Community College District, and he's a beneficiary of the Department of Education's Public Service Loan Forgiveness Waiver, which Ashley was just speaking about with that Halloween deadline, as we mentioned. So Brian, thanks so much for being here and for sharing a little bit of your experience with us.
Thanks for having me.
So to start off, could you tell us about where you went to school, what you studied, and how you financed your higher education?
Sure. I got my bachelor's degree from American University in Washington, D.C. In 1998. And I got my master's degree in history from Monmouth University in New Jersey in 2003. And really, it was, for the most part, financed by loans and grants. And I really just went for everything that was out there. anything possible. And it didn't matter like how bad it was. I just had to, I had to be the first in my family to get a master's degree was very important to me. And it was just, I was just really driven to that end.
And where did you start working after you got your master's?
After my master's, well, in between bachelor's and master's, I had several different careers, false starts, you know, just the early 20s type of thing. And so after my master's, I started teaching as an adjunct faculty member in the community college district, first at Valley, then later at East Los Angeles College. And to be honest with you, I wasn't sure that this was going to be my path, but I mean, from the first class, I was just hooked because, I mean, I'm getting paid to read books, as I always like to simplify it. And I just fell in love with the job, and I've been doing it ever since. Like, it became my calling, and this was in fall of 2003. And it was just the students, like their hunger, and they had so much need and they had so much adversity that they were overcoming to just come to my class. I mean, it still resonates with me. So, I mean, I was just hooked.
And so you've been teaching at the community college level since 2003, is that right?
Yes. I got hired full-time at Pierce College, which is within the district, back in 2008, and I'm still there.
Fantastic. And you actually first applied for PSLF a few years ago, right? So when did you initially apply, and what was your experience then?
Well, I remember when I heard about it, one of the qualifications was you had to have 10 years of full-time employment and to make the loan. So I probably applied around 2018 or 19 when I hit that 10-year anniversary from when I got hired full-time. And I mean, I was quickly rejected. And it was really because the requirement is 10 years of perfection, you know, 10 years of just not missing payments. And like, I wasn't perfect in 10 years. I was alive. I mean, I started a family, I got married, and you know, and I looked at the sheet, and it saw like when I missed those payments or whatever was really late, or it coincided like right before the birth of like one or both of my two sons. And, you know, and look, I'm just, throughout most of this, it was just minimum payments just to keep the heat off you. And so, yeah, I mean, I wasn't, hearing how strict it was, I wasn't too surprised I got rejected. I mean, but, you know, I was just very pessimistic. I'm like, this is a great idea, but I don't know. It's probably not going to work for me because I had some lapses.
Yeah, we've certainly seen that you're not alone in that experience and in having gone through this process. So then what did you do? How did you feel when you found out about the temporary PSLF waiver that the Department of Education is offering now?
Oh, my jaw hit the floor. I mean, because fortunately, I'm a member of a very wonderful union, the American Federation of Teachers, and they've been very active on trying to help faculty really, for the one, understand this, because I mean, it's just so complicated. And someone like me who just chased after every buck I could to finance my education, I mean, it just became overwhelming and defeating. So I really just had very low expectations. And when I got that message, I showed the people in my union that are like, you know, overseeing this PSLF program, like outreach. And they're like, yeah, you're forgiven. And I'm like, I think I need a second opinion. And they're like, no, you're good. And I'm telling you, I can now finally think of like the future without this cloud over my head, like thinking about my sons going to college. I mean, that's just really, that weighs on me. And I don't want them to go through what I went through. And even the generation that came just after me, I think their debt load is way higher than mine was.
Can you speak a bit too to what it means to you and what it means to your colleagues who are in similar situations to receive that notification and to sort of feel that appreciation for your decade plus of public service?
Oh, it's incredibly meaningful. I mean, just to feel that, like, this gratitude that you dedicated your career to serving the public. I mean, I don't want to sound, hammy or anything, but like the job itself is a reward. But still, it's just like that extra appreciation that this is going to be taken care of. But I mean, my only lament is that that the people that need it the most are the adjunct faculty. And I mean, when I was adjunct for about 4 years, and we're limited, we can't work full time because of the law just will only let you hit like 67%. So I know that the CFT out here is doing a lot for that, but it's, I think that once this hits more of my colleagues and more faculty, I mean, it's going to really just make a lot of people's lives better. And it's just, and this is the last thing I'll say about that, is that it'll encourage more people to get into public service, particularly teaching, which has seen such an exodus of talent. We've lost so much talent just because the numbers are just hard to really add up. And if this can help us with that, I mean, we're going to see a golden age in education.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it, and really harkens back to the intent and the desire of this program when it was created. So Brian, congratulations on receiving this forgiveness. Thank you so much for your public service as an educator. And thanks to everyone who's joined us today for this program. Our event recording will be posted to Third Way's website shortly. And we hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.